Hi everybody and welcome to Hampshire Outdoors and Survival. Mickey here, part 2 of knives, maintenance, sharpening. So this is part of a series of videos I'm doing whilst I'm here at home, unable to get out because I'm waiting for an operation and I've got to isolate, keep myself clean, healthy and undiseased. It's a hell of a subject to go through, but hey, let's get on with it. Come on, let's go and have a look. So everybody, you come back from the woods with your knife and your kit, and the first thing you do when you get home is you go through your wet gear, don't you? You hang it up to dry, you check the condition of it, check your top, no holes, dry it, clean it, make sure of it. You get your cook gear, you give it a scrub, you give it a clean, you make sure that it's all going to be usable for next time, you dry it all out, you put it away, don't you? You clean, treat your boots. You take your clothes off, you put it in the washing machine, you give them a wash and dry. Surprising how many people don't put the same thought process into their knife. Come home, hang the knife up. It'll be fine, the knife is made of metal. Not so much. Okay, so maintenance of your knife. This is going to be, it's one of your primary tools, so this is going to be a bit of a priority. You have to think practically about it and you have to think sensibly about it. So yeah, you can come home and just give it a wipe down. Okay, you can just have a simple piece of tissue, give it a wipe down, making sure it's dry, healthy and good. Or you can go a little bit further, and again this is part of the process and part of the pleasure of owning these things, caring for them, looking after them. When I was a shooter, I would come home, sort myself, my personal admin out, get cleaned up, get a brew, get a nice cup of tea, have a cigarette if I wanted to have a cigarette. Then I would secrete myself in the man cave and I would strip the shotgun or the rifle. I would strip it down to its components, I would clean them, I would make sure that they were well looked after, oiled up and all the rest of it, put the whole lot back together and put it away. And why did you do that? Well, two reasons. One, it's cleaning it, making sure it's in good order, there's no damp in there, there's no propellant left in there, there's no carbon build up, everything's nice, it's lubricated, it's clean. But you're also looking for damage. You're looking for cracks, splits, scarring, scoring, anything that could create a problem later on. Slightest scratch will hold dirt and grime, and it will then progress and become worse and worse and worse, and becomes a weak point in whatever you're using, and then it can cause stress and damage. So again, I treat my knives the same way. I inspect them. So what we'll do now, we'll shift around a little bit and we'll go through how I inspect my knives. So I come home, get myself comfy. Now, golden rule to this, get yourself comfy, sort all your other admin out first. Get your cup of tea, have your shower, get yourself relaxed. Don't panic about doing this essentially straight away. Look at something you could do later on that evening when you're having a bit of a mo. Okay, so what do I look at? Well, first of all, let's take one of my knives. So I take something like my little Puko. So this is a bone and antler handle, and it's made in sections. It's got a peened rivet there. It's got a nice little piece of brass here with a little bit of leather behind it. And then obviously you've got the blade. And the first thing you're going to inspect, obviously at all times, is the blade. Then you're going to, first of all, I look along the blade. Is it still straight? I look at the profile of the tip. Is that still straight? Is it all still in alignment? Good. It is. Not a problem. Then what I do is I turn my blade over like that and I look. Using sunlight shining on it, I look along the edge and I'm looking for any warps, divots, dinks, scratches, anything that shows any sort of damage. Roll it this way and again check that the edge is true, not just the spine. Make sure you haven't picked up a little wobble down that edge. Okay, and again turn it over the other side, have a look, same thing. Use the light reflecting off of the blade to allow you to look for scratches, dinks, chips or other problems. Okay, and the blade on that one is good. I then I look this way down it, so I'm looking this way down it, and what I'm looking for any gaps that are starting to occur, any signs of cracks, splittings, chips, irregularities where the blade joins the handles. That's the most common place for a knife to break other than the tip. Okay, that's where it receives a lot of fatigue. If you think about it, you're pushing on this piece onto here, and where's the leverage center point? It is going to usually be here. I then turn it over, I look at where the handle is joined. So on this one it's a peened handle, it's a rat tail through there and it's peened over and in. I have a look at that, make sure that it's not loose, cracked, coming away. I look at the condition of the handle as well around it, make sure there's no splits forming in that handle, make sure it's in good order. And yep, that looks in good order. And now, because this is a sectioned handle made in lots of sections, I look at each individual section. So I start at the top here with the bone. I'm looking for cracks, splits, separations, anything like that. Anything, you'll see where dirt and grime starts to get into a split. And I'm having a good look down it. Yeah, check each section individually. No, they're all good. That's all good. Let's turn it back on. Then what I'll do is I'll take my fingers on the spine and run it down the spine. And what I'm feeling for, because you'll feel more than see, any damage that the spine's taken, any little rough edges there. And if you've got a rough edge, you're going to look at taking it out and removing it, because again, it's an irregularity in the metal that can hold grit, dirt. Little chips, dinks become weak spots, and they grow with time, and eventually that will be a failure point for the knife. And that one's pretty good, so we'll put that one to one side. Back in the sheath, we'll get on to sheaths in a minute. We will look at something like a folding knife. Now it's exactly the same sort of process. So you open out your folding knife, okay, you have a look at your blade in exactly the same way. You check the blade, that's the working part of the knife, you check the condition of it, okay. And again, you're looking for wobbles, chips, dinks and splits, okay. But with a folding knife it now varies slightly. What I then do is I take the blade and the handle and I give it a little wiggle, and what I'm feeling for is any play. Has the hinge become loose? Okay, if it's a bolted hinge like this one, they might just need nipping up, but it could also be a sign of wear on the hinge and the hinge pin, which in some cases you can replace on things like the Leatherman and that. On other knives, not so much, and it may be then time to retire that knife because you're developing a failure point. The other thing I then look at on a folding knife is the condition of the scales. Do they all fit okay? Are there any gaps forming, cracks, splits? Because you know you've been working it hard. Have I pushed dirt and grime between the scales and the metal? Okay, and general condition. Then with a folding knife, I have a look in here, and again, all I'm looking for is dirt, grime, muck, pitting, anything gets in there that will slowly decay and alter the condition of your blade. So with your folding knife, you quite often get grit and dirt, muck. If you're doing game preparation, you can get blood in here. So again, another thing to look at when you're buying your folding knives is how good is it in there. Now in this knife, it's not so good because there's gaps between the scales and the metal. There is so many places muck can get in there, and this is designed as a hunting knife. I wouldn't use it as a hunting knife primarily because if I'm gralloching animals, there's too many places for muck, grit and dirt to get into. But if you can, what you ideally want to do is if you use something like, right, now this, and again, depends on the scales of your knife. So what I do, I take a little bit of acetone, put it on a cloth, little dab on there, little dab on there. What I'm looking for, is it degrading the plastics? Is it degrading the glues and the resins? If it is, you can't use it. Then you're going to go to something else like WD-40, but quite often in most of my knives it's okay, so I get a little bit of acetone on there and I will just work it through the inside of the knife there, taking out any grime, any nasties, especially things like pine resin and stuff like that. Hook out any chips and any muck that's in there. That cleans that out for you. That's great. Then what you ideally want to do is get a little bit of oil. You want a light oil. Some people use WD-40. I don't like using WD-40 on knives because it can separate glues. But what you can do is you can get yourself 3-in-1 oil. I use Singer sewing machine oil. I've had this for donkey's years, and that just goes to show you don't need a lot. But again, a few drops of that on your cotton bud, and ideally you're looking for a mineral oil because obviously that's metal, and then I just work that in, and just a general coating. It doesn't have to be huge amounts, just a little coating in there, and it just helps to protect the metal from any grime, any moisture, any damp. The hidden bits are always the bits that are going to fail you. Okay, don't forget to get up around the blade here where it's in the hinge, and whilst you're there, there's no harm and just giving a little tiny drop of oil down onto the hinge. You could go to the full point, have a full strip down, take the scales off on something like this because they're screwed on, take the scales off, take the pin out, full strip. Okay, if that's your thing, you could do that. There's no problem with that. Give it an absolutely thorough clean, give it a little drop of oil. Okay, look at the blade, just a couple of drops of oil. I'm not going to be using this knife for a long time, so a couple of drops like that. The knife's now clean, it's in good order. And lastly, once I've folded it, just to make sure, a couple of little drops on the hinge because it's a moving part. Okay, I can put that away now, confident that that's clean. It's oiled, it's lubricated, it's protected from the environment, it's not going to damage any further. Now, fixed blade knives are a little bit different. Let's go with a large one because it makes it a little bit simple. So, your fixed blade knives, and this I will go through slowly. So, my fixed blade knife, as I said, come home and inspect it. Inspect the edge, look for the dinks, chips, marks, or anything on there that I'm not happy with. Got a little mark there, a little mark there, okay? Look for the deeper scratches, and as you can see, this is a well-worked knife, okay? And that blade has been oiled recently. Come up, have a look here. I'm looking for splits, cracks, chips, signs of fatigue, straightness. I'm looking for fit, finish. Is everything still tight? Is anything developing a gap? Come back onto the scales. I'm looking for cracks, splits, dents, chips, round the rivets, all that there. Then I go to the spine. Again, check how true the spine is, check all your fits, and look for gaps where the scales meet the tang. If you're developing gaps, then you need to look at tightening the knife up. Again, look underneath, and it's exactly the same process down there, and then come to the hilt of the handle and check that as well. Okay, so all of them are different. Some of them that if you're developing a gap, a drop of epoxy will seal that gap and refit it. Others you might need to take the pins out and put new pins in. Now, cleaning process. So cleaning process is a bigger blade, so it's a bit bigger cleaning process. So piece of tissue, and if need be, a piece of Scotch-Brite. Now, Scotch-Brite will remove material from the blade. If where I've got it treated there, if I work on it with the Scotch-Brite, you will see that it starts to take away the colouring of the fitment or the coating. So again, you've got to look at it carefully and think what you need. But what I will do with this knife, because this knife, as you can see, it's been well used, regularly picks up pine tar. So a little bit of acetone on there, and gently, there's no pressure in this, okay, no pressure at all. I give the blade a good clean, and I go, there's a little bit down there, you can see there, take that bit of pine tar off, and I work my way around the blade making sure that I've got anything nasty off of it. And like I say, no pressure with that. Then a nice piece of clean cloth, tissue, rag, whatever you use, and give it a good wipe. Be careful of your edges at all times, and again, you've inspected the blade, so you know there's no chips, dinks or scratches in it, and if there are, we'll come back to sorting that in a minute. But you're going to clean at this point. You're just making sure and inspecting. And again, you can use, now I don't use acetone on the handles because quite often handles are bonded, and I don't use acetone on wood. Okay, if you use acetone on wood, it strips the oils out. If I look at the wood and I think to myself, I've picked up a little bit of tar or something on there, a piece of clean Scotch Brite, it's got nothing added to it, it's just a Scotch Brite, and use like a light piece of sandpaper, just work it over it until you've removed whatever material that is. Okay, so it's taken it out. You never want to strip from any organic handle, so that could be wood, that could be bone, that could be antler. You never want to strip the oils from it. You don't want to dry it out, so you don't use acetone on handles. Okay, now on this one you can see down here there's quite a dark pattern which you could think was a split. It's not, it's actually a bit of grain. But again, that's the sort of thing you're looking for. If you start to form a line along the handle, look at it carefully. Is it a split? Is it the graining? Okay, if it's the graining, it's not a problem. If it's a split, you then know that that handle's going to need to be replaced, and replace it as soon as possible. If I was out in the bush, I might look at binding that up with a bit of tape or something like that just to protect it. But I'm not. I'm here at home, and everything looks a reasonable fit and tight. So the other thing you'll notice, I've put a bit of card, just an Amazon box on the surface here. That helps because, as you see, you'll spill things like acetone, oils and that, so you want to be careful of the surfaces you're working on. So now we'll have a little bit of a look at sharpening and how I will go through looking after my blades and sharpening. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to hit you with is a stone. So this is my stone. There are many like it, but this stone is mine. Without my stone, my knives are blunt. With my stone, my knives are sharp. So let's get into stones. Wet stones, oil stones. It's purely a personal preference. I like an oil stone. Some people like a wet stone. The main thing that you want is a coarse grit and a fine grit. Don't panic too much about what grits they are, as long as you've got a coarse and a fine side. Okay, most stones are made for sharpening things like knives and chisels, so the grits will apply. Okay, now this is an oil stone, so what I do, I use a little bit of light mineral oil on my stone. And this is partly to lubricate the stone for the knife to work on, and as you can see, it soaks in quite quickly. Now you can draw an edge towards you, okay, or you can work an edge away from you. I like to work my edges away towards me, but across the blade from front edge to the back. There is a reason for this. For me, you gain a little bit less of a burr, and you can see how you're working. How do you work out your profile? Right, so you can see that I have an edge on there. I can see the angle of the edge, so when I'm sharpening I want it to start to shine on that very tip of that edge and the shine to increase back to this point here. I then know that I've got my profile. So I place my knife down flat, I lift it up till my profile, okay, that secondary bevel touches the stone. I then use my finger or my thumb, depending on the size of the knife, to lock it, and I gently work the knife up the stone. Now I'm not applying a huge amount of pressure. If you're working towards you, it's the same process. Find the angle, and work that way. Again, when I'm doing the other side, find the angle, and I'm not applying a huge amount of downward force. I would rather take time and have it take longer than have it sharpen fast and me mess it up. This is one of those tasks that takes concentration. Let's come round to the finer side. Right, find the bevel. See, work either way. See by the shine that's coming on there. And that's the method that most people are going to use. Like I say, the important thing is you get that angle right. You don't start sharpening back here, you're sharpening on the edge that you need to sharpen. Take your time, find your bevel. Now this takes practice, time. Oh, lovely, lovely, and effort. Once you've got your blade as sharp as you want it, give it a clean, because you want to take off any of those bits of stone that are on there. So this is probably my preferred method for most of my knives, and the method I would suggest that a lot of you have a look at. So Mickey's favourite piece of sharpening equipment, right? It's quite simple. This is the item. This is a Sharpening Pro. Okay, there are many different systems very similar to it. They all work just as well as one another. Yes, I had to pay £30 for this a few years back. About the same money now, but again, a great piece of kit. So you get a selection of stones, and they're water stones. So you place them into water and you soak them beforehand. And as you may gather, this is a retake. This is take 2. Move back a bit further, got that line up there. Alright, let's try and get this done a bit easier this time so that it looks okay. Right, okay, the Sharpening Pro is a very simple system to set up. Looks a little bit complicated when you first see it. Okay, let's adjust the camera. Okay, looks a bit complicated when you first see it, so it's quite simple. You have a set of jaws here which will hold your knife. You have a tower here, or a bar here, which just screws in like that. And you have a butterfly nut to lock that in place. Now, key things to remember, this ball here needs to be in the centre of this here. Two things to think about: this alignment through the centre, this alignment here is how you align your blade. Okay, so you can take your knife, your blade that you wish to sharpen, and you centralise it on this set of jaws. Wind the jaws up until they meet the knife, and you want your edge to be parallel with that in its majority. nip it up, tighten it off, lock it off, simple as that. Okay, so now my knife is in the jaws, it's in there quite firm, quite well. Now the stones are wet stones, so they're in the water, and one of the things you can do is when they're in the water, if they're getting a bit clogged up or clagged up with iron filings, just give them a gentle tap, the iron filings will loosen out. What you can then do is you then fit your stone into its little clamp like that, making sure it's flat, okay, and it's held in the jaws of the stone. As you use your stones, you'll see there you start to get a curve in them. At that point you need to replace them. You can turn them over and use the opposite edge to start wearing through. You place this piece into this piece. Right, now here's trick time, top trick time, especially if you're new to this. Take a blue pen or a pen and mark your bevel along the knife, okay, and just come back onto the blade so you can see where it is. Now you're going to want to do now is place that pin through there, and start off with, you just lay your stone on your knife edge, as you can see there. So adjust this. Now, as you can see there, that's too steep. If I gently pull that there, you can see I'm just touching the very edge. So I need to lower this until, when I pull it through, I'm taking enough of the blue off to show that I'm on my edge and I'm on my profile. So if I work down that now, I can see exactly where I'm working the knife, and that's it. That's pretty much it. It's as simple as that. The bonus with this system is it rotates, and that means that I'm getting exactly the same angles on this side, okay? And you can start with a coarse edge or coarse stone. You can drop down to your next stone, start refining your edge, rotate it again, and then drop down to, if need be, your final stone, which is going to be your polishing stone. As easy as that. As easy as that. It's a great piece of equipment, especially for somebody just starting out with knives and sharpening, who wants to make sure that they can maintain the knife to a good edge. The important piece is just finding that initial angle. Once you've found that initial angle, you can sharpen your knife and get a very fine edge on it. And if you need to repair a knife, take dinks and scratches or chips out of it, again, starting with the coarser stones, you can do so. So that's my favourite sharpening system, the Rooksim Pro. Makes life a lot easier. Some people will say to me it's a cheat. whatever system works, but that means I can come home, refine an edge on a knife and get it spot on every time. Great bit of kit, a very worthwhile investment. So it brings me to the final part of the sharpening process, which is often forgotten about and often not thought about. A simple piece of leather laid on a block like that. Now that's just a simple piece of leather. It can be a belt, it can be a piece of leather you found. You will always make a burr on a knife when sharpening, and it's quite often that small that you hardly even notice it's there. By just a simple strop, you'll take that off. Now that's the coarse side. Take the burr off. If I want to refine an edge, especially a very fine edge, on this side I've got a little bit of diamond compound, okay, which is just a compound used for polishing. A couple of passes on that will make all the difference to that edge, okay. And if we take a piece of paper, guys, I know you want to see it, a simple piece of paper, just take a piece of receipt paper, last section is the most overlooked section, the one that causes the most issues, the one that causes the most damage to your knives, okay. And this one is dear to my heart because in my early days I damaged more than one knife almost irreparably. As you know, sheaths and scabbards. Okay, so you can have a Kydex sheath, you can have a leather sheath, you can have a canvas sheath. And what is a sheath's job? It holds a knife. So what do you do when you're out and about? Well, whenever you finish with your knife, you put it back in. There's a problem with that. If the knife is dirty when I put it back in the sheath, picked up a bit of moisture, a bit of blood, a bit of gristle, wet leaf, bit of twig, bit of resin, it imparts it into what you're putting it into. So the final process for me when I'm cleaning my kit when I get home is one, get one of these, and I will sit here and I will give the sheath a good poke round, making sure there's no loose debris in there, nothing nasty like leaves and that. Blow it out. Then quite often what I'll do is take a bit of tissue. It's very similar to gun cleaning this. Wrap the bit of tissue around that, and again within the sheath give it a bit of a wipe round. If it hasn't gone all the way to the bottom, fold it over. Give it a bit of a clean, give it a wipe out in the sheath, okay? When you've done that, what you can do, you can use either WD-40, like I say, I'm not so keen on that on handles and that, or you can use just a little bit of oil in the sheath. Now leather sheaths are a bit different because obviously you don't want to put a mineral oil with leather, okay? So there's an old rule, okay? Mineral with mineral, animal with animal, vegetable with vegetable. That refers to oils, okay? So use a mineral oil on something like your metal blade. So again, we've finished, we've cleaned and we've sharpened. So what do? Bit of oil. Give the blade a little fine coating of oil. Again, up round the metal parts of the handle, a little bit of oil, anywhere that moisture, condensation could get to and cause you an issue, Okay, it doesn't have to be a super heavy amount, but it's just a little fine coating. When it comes to handles, I use, courtesy of my mate, sticks. If it's a wooden handle or even a bone handle, I've got a bit of pine tar oil there, which is a pine and turpentine mix. I feed the wood, which is what you're doing. So any of the wood treatments that you use for antique furniture restoring, whether it be Danish oil, whether it be any form of natural oil, even down to olive oil, will help in this process. Put into the wood. What that does, it helps to seal the wood, but it also helps to feed it. It helps to put natural organic oils and waters back into the wood. One thing with wood is it dries out. So I put that on the handle and I'll let that sit for 10-15 minutes before wiping it off. Again, the same thing with my bone and horn handles. Okay, I use a little bit of that on there because again it feeds it, it stops it from drying out. Now, one of the best things I've found over the years for bone handles is something called neat's foot oil. Okay, and that's a treatment for horses' hooves. But again, it just cleans it, feeds it, seals it, gives it a lovely finish, lovely bit of a shine. Okay, doesn't affect the grip. And to finish that one off again, because it's a carbon steel, this one, so again it wants a bit of protection. A little bit of oil. I can put that back in the sheath. Don't forget the spine. I'll put that back in the sheath and know that that's protected. Again, because I've taken the sheath, just got a little brush, got out anything that could be in there that could cause an issue. The most overlooked piece of equipment you have is a sheath. If you've got moisture in the sheath, dry it. Hang upside down, dry it. Okay, before you leave the knife in it. I can't tell you how many times people have got hold of me to repair a knife, and the problem they've had, the simple mistake they've made, is they've come back from the woods, they've sharpened their knife, they've cleaned their knife, they've done all the bits they should, they've put the knife back into the sheath, hung it up, haven't gone near it for months on end, and the first thing they find when they take it out of that sheath is it's pitted and ruined, purely and simply because they've had a bit of leaf in there or a bit of moisture, and the sheath will hold it to the blade and over time destroy it. So there we go. Sharpening, knife maintenance, knife care, looking after it. And remember that the old adage is quite simple: if you look after your knife will look after you. Okay, that's the same with every tool in your kit and your equipment. You look after it, you spend that little bit of time, that little bit of effort doing it. Now, one of the problems with the bushcrafting, wild camping, survival world is everybody loves their kit. People love to collect their kit. People sometimes forget there is maintenance with that kit. Part of the pleasure of having and doing these things is getting up the woods and having your adventures, but also the coming home, the sorting out your admin, sorting out your gear, sorting out your kit, caring for your kit, looking after your kit. That's all part and parcel of it. So there we go. Knife maintenance and sharpening and a bit of care. Again, I'll come back to that item, the Ruixin Pro, RUIXINPRO. Like I say, about £30. If you're just starting out with sharpening and things like that, it's a great way to look at it. Okay, whetstones, oil stones, it's a purely individual choice. There is not one better than the other. I get it all the time. Oh yeah, you've got to use this, and you've got to use that. You've got to use ceramics. You've got to use that. There's hundreds of tips, tricks and methods. These are just the ones I prefer. Yes, you can sharpen a knife to a razor's edge on the bottom of a teacup. Yeah, you can. You can. Mrs. ain't so happy with me keep stealing tea cups to sharpen knives. There we go. Anyhow, hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you've learnt a little bit or seen a bit that you thought, might try that, Mickey. Find what works for you. Stay safe, get outdoors, have your adventures, enjoy yourselves. This is part 2 of knives. Part 3 is just going to be a talk on EDCs and specialist tools and knives. Guys, please join us on the Sunny Social for our live stream. Like, share, comment, do all that stuff. And if you disagree with something I've done, if you think that my method isn't right or should be done a different way, let me know. I'm always happy to learn, always happy to look at it. Negative comment, as long as it's put the right way, is gratefully received as much as a good comment. So there we go. Stay safe, be happy, be good, love those you do, forgive those you don't, and look after your knives. This is Mickey, Amateur Outdoors Survival. Mickey out.